Hello everyone, I'm Craig Williams here with your latest Disney news. Today, Walt Disney Parks and Resorts has sued Florida Governor Ron DeSantis as well as Meredith Ivey, the acting secretary of the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity, Martin Garcia, the chair of the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District Board, along with members Michael Sasso, Brian Onks Jr., Ron Perry, and Bridget Ziegler, as well as John Class, the district administrator of the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. This lawsuit comes on the same day that the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District Board voided Disney's development agreement with Reedy Creek Improvement District. Disney is bringing this complaint to the court, citing causes of action including a contracts clause violation, takings clause violation, due process clause violation, and First Amendment violations. Disney explained exactly why they needed to take this action in their introduction, saying, "For more than half a century, Disney has made an immeasurable impact on Florida and its economy, establishing Central Florida as a top global tourist destination and attracting tens of millions of visitors to the state each year. People and families from every corner of the globe have traveled to Walt Disney World because of the unrivaled guest experience it provides and the deep emotional connection that generations of fans have with Disney's timeless stories and characters. A targeted campaign of government retaliation orchestrated at every step by Governor DeSantis as punishment for Disney's protected speech now threatens Disney's business operations, jeopardizes its economic future in the region, and violates its constitutional rights." Today's action is the latest strike. At the governor's bidding, the state's oversight board has purported to void publicly noticed and duly agreed development contracts, which had laid the foundation for billions of Disney's investment dollars and thousands of jobs. This government action was patently retaliatory, patently anti-business, and patently unconstitutional. But the governor and his allies have made clear they do not care and will not stop. The governor recently declared that his team would not only void the development agreement, just as they did today, but also plan to look at things like taxes on hotels, tolls on roads, developing some of the property that the district owns with more amusement parks, and even putting a state prison next to Walt Disney World. Who knows? I just think the possibilities are endless, he said. Disney regrets that it has come to this, but having exhausted efforts to seek a resolution, the company is left with no choice but to file this lawsuit to protect its cast members, guests, and local development partners from a relentless campaign to weaponize government power against Disney in retaliation for expressing a political viewpoint unpopular with certain state officials. Disney is enormously proud of the foundational role it has played in creating Central Florida's tourism industry. The Reedy Creek Improvement District, Disney's local governing jurisdiction, was integral to the success from the beginning in 1967. Fast forward 5 decades, and Disney is an unparalleled engine for economic growth in the state. Among other distinctions, Disney is one of Central Florida's largest taxpayers, with more than $1.1 billion paid in state and local taxes last year. Disney is also one of the largest employers in the state, with more than 75,000 cast members. The state of Florida has flourished in the years since Walt Disney himself surveyed many acres of swampland in 1963 and dreamed the possibility of Walt Disney World. Florida's elected officials have long understood how consequential Disney is to the state's economy and future, just as Disney has sought to be a constructive, responsible, and charitable Florida resident. Governor DeSantis and his allies paid no mind to the governing structure that facilitated Reedy Creek's successful development until 1 year ago when the governor decided to target Disney. There is no room for disagreement about what happened here. Disney expressed its opinion on state legislation and was then punished by the state for doing so. Governor DeSantis announced the Disney statement had crossed the line, a line evidently separating permissible speech from intolerable speech, and launched a barrage of threats against the company in immediate response. Since then, the governor, the state legislature, and the governor's hand-picked local government regulators have moved beyond threats to official action, employing the machinery of the state and a coordinated campaign to damage Disney's ability to do business in Florida. State leaders have not been subtle about their reasons for government intervention. They have proudly declared that Disney deserves this fate because of what Disney said. This is as clear a case of retaliation as this court is ever likely to see. At the governor's behest, the state legislature first voted to dissolve the long-standing Reedy Creek Improvement District, then ultimately voted to give near-complete control of Reedy Creek Improvement District to the governor himself. As the Florida representative who introduced the Reedy Creek dissolution bill declared to Florida House State Affairs Committee, "You kick the hornet's nest, things come up. And I will say this, you got me on one thing. This bill does target one company. It targets the Walt Disney Company." Disney has never wanted a fight with the Florida government. The company sought to de-escalate the matter for nearly a year, trying several times to spark a productive dialogue with the DeSantis administration, to no avail. Amid great uncertainty about the lengths to which the state would go to keep punishing Disney for its views, Reedy Creek Improvement District and the company gave public notice in January 2023 that they would enter into contracts to secure future development for the district and Walt Disney World. Contracts that implemented a comprehensive plan for the district that the DeSantis administration itself had found compliant with Florida law months earlier. Through the development plan and implementing contracts, Disney set huge goals for itself and laid foundations for spectacular economic growth in Central Florida. Disney plans to invest over $17 billion in Walt Disney World over the next decade. The company estimates that those investments will create 13,000 new Disney jobs in that same 10-year time period. Big goals aside, these contracts are land use agreements between a developer and its local regulator. They are similar in character to contracts between other developers and special districts to fix long-term development rights and obligations, thereby facilitating the certainty needed to ensure investments and effective commercial progress. Contrary to misunderstandings and mischaracterizations by some government leaders, they do not undermine the newly constituted Central Florida Tourism Oversight District Board's ability to govern and exercise authority, including by imposing taxes, exercising the power of eminent domain, approving or disapproving building permit applications, including for projects carried out pursuant to the development agreement, building roads, providing emergency services, or issuing bonds. Moreover, nothing about these contracts was a surprise. They were discussed and approved after open, notice public forums in compliance with Florida law. And in the very same legislation that replaced the elected board governing Disney with board members picked by the governor, the state legislature reaffirmed the enforceability of all prior contracts, including those here. Disney takes seriously its responsibility to shareholders, employees, and the many residents and local businesses in Central Florida whose livelihoods depend on Walt Disney World, and Disney now is forced to defend itself against a state weaponizing its power to inflict political punishment. It is a clear violation of Disney's federal constitutional rights, and under the Contracts Clause, the Takings Clause, the Due Process Clause, and the First Amendment, for the state to inflict a concerted campaign of retaliation because the company expressed an opinion with which the government disagreed. And it is a clear violation of these rights for the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District Board to declare its own legally binding contracts void and unenforceable. Disney thus seeks relief from this court in order to carry out its long-held business plans. Disney finds itself in this regrettable position because it expressed a viewpoint the governor and his allies did not like. Disney wishes that these things could have been resolved in a different way, but Disney also knows that it is fortunate to have the resources to take a stand against the state's retaliation, a stand smaller businesses and individuals might not be able to take when the state comes after them for expressing their own views. In America, the government cannot punish you for speaking your mind. Disney is hoping for the following outcome from the lawsuit. A. Declare that the legislative declaration is unlawful and unenforceable because it abrogates Disney's rights in violation of the Contracts Clause. B. Declare that the legislative declaration is an unlawful taking of Disney's property rights without payment of just compensation in violation of the Takings Clause. C. Declare that the legislative declaration is unlawful and unenforceable because it was an arbitrary and irrational voiding of the development agreement and restrictive covenants in violation of the Due Process Clause. D. Declare that the legislative declaration is unlawful and unenforceable because it was enacted in retaliation for Disney's speech in violation of the First Amendment. E. Declare that the contracts remain in effect and enforceable. F. Declare that the Senate Bill 4C and House Bill 9B are unlawful and unenforceable because they were enacted in retaliation for Disney's political speech in violation of the First Amendment. G. Issue an order enjoining defendants from enforcing the legislative declaration. H. Issue an order enjoining defendants from enforcing Senate Bill 4C and House Bill 9B. I. Award plaintiff its attorney fees and costs. And J. Grant such other reliefs as this court may deem just and proper. Disney presents factual background in the lawsuit, including the timeline of events between Disney, Reedy Creek, and Governor Ron DeSantis. When the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District discussed voiding the development agreement, they cited Reedy Creek for not mailing proper notice to property owners who were affected by the development agreements. As far as it's concerned with the lawsuit, Disney does mention in the timeline of events that they presented the Orlando Sentinel with proper notice, but they said nothing about mailing notice to property owners. So it could be that Reedy Creek did in fact forget to notify property owners, or they have an argument to make that no one was mailed notice because there were no property owners who were actually affected by the development agreement. We'll have to wait to see what actually happens with that. As of the time of this recording, Governor Ron DeSantis' office did release a statement saying, "We are unaware of any legal right that a company has to operate its own government or maintain special privileges not held by other businesses in the state. This lawsuit is yet another unfortunate example of their hope to undermine the will of the Florida voters and operate outside the bounds of the law." For more on this story and other Disney news, as well as theme park discussion, check out next week's episode of The Diz Unplugged, airing live every Tuesday at 1 o'clock p.m. at youtube.com/DizUnplugged, and stay up to date with all the Disney news over at wdwinfo.com.